This is the time of year when the weather forces us to spend more time indoors, which also makes the winter months the perfect time for you to focus on some cozy decorating projects while you're hibernating inside. In this video, I'm sharing 4 cozy decor projects that are simple and budget-friendly and that will add charming vintage touches to your home. For the first project, I'm going to be making 2 faux rosemary topiaries. I always see these in home decor magazines and I just think that they're so charming, but they can be quite pricey. The real ones can start at $40 and the faux ones are also expensive. I thrifted this really pretty wreath from Goodwill this past summer, and it had these picks, these rosemary picks. So I decided, since the wreath was already pretty full, I decided that I was going to remove these rosemary picks and I was going to use them to make some faux rosemary topiaries. I already had some of these little mini styrofoam balls, and my idea was that I was going to stick these picks into the balls and then use these thrifted clay pots to use as the base for the topiary. I picked up 2 sticks from my front yard and then I decided to paint the styrofoam balls green just so that when I stuck the rosemary picks in them, the white foam would not show through. Originally, I intended to use 1 styrofoam ball for each of the topiaries, but I realized very quickly that I didn't have enough rosemary picks to completely cover a whole ball. So instead, what I had to do was I had to cut 1 ball in half and use half of that foam ball for each of the topiaries. That way I had enough picks for both. Then it was just a matter of sticking each of the picks into that foam ball, sometimes adding a little bit of hot glue just to reinforce that, and then inserting the stick into the foam that I had placed in the little terracotta pots. I also added some pea gravel that I collected from my backyard to cover the foam on each of the little pots, and I think that that finished it off very nicely. I think they look so cute on this little server that I have in my kitchen on either side of my ironstone tureen. I wish I had more picks to use for each topiary to make them a little bit more fuller, but I was working with what I had, and I think that they still turn out really cute. The next decorating project that I tackled was doing a plate wall in my entryway. This is another feature that I see all the time in decorating magazines and home shows. And this is a perfect way to display those vintage plates that you've thrifted. They could be transferware plates, they could be ironstone plates. You can even use a combination of plates and baskets or plates and mirrors. I do have a plate wall already, a very simple one in my living room. So that one uses ironstone plates with an antique mirror, and I really like that look, so I wanted to do that in my entryway as well. For this project, I'm using 4 blue and white transferware plates that I thrifted for a few dollars. I'm also using some paper clips and some ribbon and a glue gun, of course. Now, there are those adhesive plate hangers that you can purchase from Amazon, or you might even have some of those metal plate hangers. But this idea came to me on the spur of the moment, and I did not want to have to go through the trouble of ordering anything. So I decided to make my own with the ribbon, with the hot glue, and with the paper clips. So I cut this ribbon down because it was a little too wide, and then I inserted one of the ends of the ribbon into the paper clip, and I put a dab of hot glue on the plate. I stuck one of the ends of the ribbon to the plate, and then I stuck the other end of the ribbon over that. I have used this technique successfully for several projects. Those plates that I showed you that were on either side of that vintage mirror in my family room, they've been hanging there for over 5 years and never fallen off. Another nice thing about this is that while it does not look pretty from the back, you can easily remove this just by dipping the plate in hot water for a few minutes, and you can just peel off the hot glue without damaging the plate. This is the wall in my entryway where I'm going to be hanging these plates, 2 on either side of this vintage mirror. And I'm just eyeballing where the plates are going to go. I'm a great one for just doing that. I don't believe in precise measurements, at least not for something like this. If one of the plates is too high or too low, I am not afraid of just taking it out and making another hole. And after I hung the plates, I just spent a few minutes styling the chest of drawers, bringing in a lamp and my Mozart bust, and just arranging books and little knickknacks around. I'm very happy with how the plates look on either side of that mirror. I think the blue and white complements the gold of the mirror really well and also complements the wood tone of the chest of drawers really well. So I think they just added another layer of interest to this very small entryway that I have. The next project that is really fun to do and can save you quite a bit of money is to make one of these box pleat lampshade skirts or slipcovers. This project it's not hard, but it does require attention to detail and more fabric than you think. The first step is to measure the circumference of the top of your shade and multiply that by 3. Next, you want to measure the length of your shade and take into account extra fabric for seam allowances and overlap. The strip of fabric I was using was not wide enough, so I had to sew 2 strips together to get that 3 times the circumference of my shade, and that allowed me to make 2-inch box pleats. I did a full tutorial of this lampshade and also 2 other easier lampshade covers in a previous video, so I will leave that linked below if you want more detailed instructions. But what I'm doing now is I am going to be pinning down my box pleats. I am making them 2 inches wide, so what you need to do is you need to start your first fold and then put a pin in there. And from that pin, I'm measuring 2 inches, putting another pin, and then I am folding the fabric back so that the edge of that fold meets the fold on the back of the lampshade cover, if that makes sense. So once you start your first one, that's usually the hardest one. But once you start the first one, and then you just measure 2 inches from the edge of that pleat, put a pin, and that pin will be your guide for how far to take the next fold. So you're going to be basically alternating folding the fabric in the front to meet the edge of a pleat and then folding it in the back to meet the edge of the pleat. And you just do this all the way down until you've used all of your fabric. It's really important to take your time and go slowly and make sure that all of your folds are nice and smooth. And once everything is pinned, you can take it to your sewing machine. I measured approximately 1 inch down from the top of my skirt because you do want the pleats to stick up a little bit above the top of your lampshade. And I'm just following that straight line all the way down the length of my fabric. And after that first line is stitched, I am measuring 1/2 inch from the top of that stitch line and making a second row of stitching. And this will just ensure that all of the pleats are stabilized and that they will hold their shape better. To determine where the bottom hem should fall, I actually put the slip covers or the skirt on the lampshade that I was planning to use it on, and I measured and I pinned. And after that bottom hem was sewed, I went and I ironed everything really, really well. You want to make sure all of your pleats are nice and smooth and flat. And since this is going to be a skirt, I wanted to be able to fasten it on and off. So I'm just using one of these little simple metal clips. This way I have the option of using the lampshade as is, or if I want to dress that up a little bit more, I can always clip on this really cute box pleat skirt that I made. This is just a simple vignette that I put together just so you could see what the finished skirt looks like on the lampshade. Again, if you want to watch the full tutorial and also to see how I made two more simple lampshade skirts, I will leave the link to that video below. For the last Decor DIY project, I'm going to be making a French-inspired grain sack pillow cover. These can also be quite expensive. As you can see from these pictures, they run anywhere from $59 to $76, and they are so easy to make. I already had a down-filled pillow insert, but I didn't have any neutral or beige colored pillow cover. So I just sewed a very easy pillow cover from a remnant of drop cloth fabric that I had purchased for another project from Home Depot. So after sewing this very easy pillow cover, I used painter's tape to mark off the stripes. Now, it's up to you how many stripes you want to add, how wide you want them to be. In my experience, I like the look of 3 stripes, and that means a wider stripe in the middle of the pillow cover and then 2 narrower ones on either side. So here I'm just using painter's tape to tape off the first stripe, and then once that one is done, I will move on to the 2 narrower stripes on either side. I'm using acrylic paint in red, and I'm using one of those little foam applicators that you use for stenciling, but you can use any color that you want. You could also use a paintbrush. My advice is to go light because I was trying to mimic the look of a vintage grain sack fabric, so the stripes would not really be that vibrant. They would be faded and uneven. That's the look I was going for. Also, make sure that you put a piece of cardboard or some folded newspaper inside your pillow cover so that when you're stenciling, the paint does not bleed through to the other side. So now that the middle stripe is done and dry, you want to make sure that it's dry, I'm going to mark off the narrower stripes that are going to go on either side. You don't have to wait for the paint to dry to remove the tape. You can peel it off right away. You do have to wait for the paint to dry completely if you're going to be painting something else on top of it. So you could definitely leave the pillow cover just with the stripes. I think it looks very French like that. But I have these stencils that I ordered from Amazon several years ago when I was painting furniture. So I decided to add a design to my pillow cover. So I'm actually going to be mixing 2 different stencils. That's the nice thing about these. You can use them, mix and match them, and then you can just wash them and reuse them over and over again. So I decided to use this Chateau design, and I'm using a contrasting gray color for that. Then I decided that this shade of gray was lighter than what I wanted, so the second coat that I did was with this darker gray. I believe it's called Zinc, and I just went over everything in this darker gray color. As you can see, I did not use the whole stencil. I didn't use that scroll at the top or the little squiggly ones on the side. I decided the design needed a little something on the top, so I borrowed this crown from my bee stencil and I used the same gray color to stencil that above the other stencil. After letting the paint dry really well, it was time to put the insert into the pillow cover, and I think it is the perfect accent for this Louis XV style chair that I have in my living room. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I hope to see you in the next one.